Hi everybody and welcome back to this week's episode of B2BNAV. This week it's going to be quite a conversational topic in the sense of we wanted to discuss the future of websites. We're seeing our clients and a lot of the different companies trying new techniques and new technologies out there now to kind of make their websites pop and bring them to life. And we've got a myriad of experience, I guess, on the call today. Different generational aspects, different specialisms, and different skills who can certainly pass comment on where websites are at the minute, the direction some people are taking, and I guess the merits and some of the drawbacks of those as well. So where shall we start with this, the future of websites? Websites as a whole, I guess, we're typically seen as the shop window to a brand. I guess that's where most people start off with. Do we think that's still relevant? Does anybody want to chip in there in terms of, I guess, that as an opening comment?
I think the first thing that we kind of have to talk about here is how everything's multi-channel these days, and we can't be sure what the front window to our brand is. Mm-hmm. If we went back 20 years ago or 30 years ago, the front of your brand might well be a yellow pages entry. Yep. Nowadays, going back 10 years ago, it would have been your website. Nowadays, people can find you in a myriad of places. Mm-hmm. So for some people on that journey, the website is going to be your shop window. For other people, it might well be your social media presence or your trade media presence, things like that. So I think we have to be aware of the fact that we don't know where somebody's going to drop into the journey these days and what people know about our brand when they see each of these, different channels.
And do you think that's a generational consideration, or do you think it's a buyer journey consideration?
I think a little bit of both. I think we'll see patterns changing across generations, but mm-hmm. I think also just the way technology's been moving and the different channels that are out there to get your information, that's probably been the main driving force behind this.
All right, okay. And picking up on that point, I guess I always come to you for the age generational thing, Sam, but it's always interesting to get your perspective. If you're looking at a brand or thinking of engaging with a brand, whether it's for a purchase or an employment perspective or whatever it may be, where's the first place you go to? And this is very individual to you, I guess, but I mean, representative of the younger guys as well.
I think for me, a lot of the time, I tend to go to websites and then I normally find social links on their website. Mm-hmm. And I feel like now you sort of want this almost complete experience of that brand, and John will know more than anyone about sort of keeping it consistent across those channels. Mm-hmm. And I think that to me is important, that you can go on the website and then there's a link to something else and there's a link to something else, and you have this complete picture of a brand, rather than I think you used to just have, as you guys were saying, here's the shop window, here's all you're getting.
So you're seeing it more as a hub almost, in a way, like an access point to branch out from into other areas.
Yeah, it's more of like an expansive experience now than I think it was before.
Okay. And John, would you echo that? I guess in terms of, obviously there's the brand consistency point as it flows out through the websites. Yeah. But do you think people are going to websites to get that 360 experience these days, or do you think that's more of a, as Sam's kind of suggested there, an entry point to then carve out?
I think Sam's right, and I think it's really interesting when you think back to sort of the dawn of websites. Mm-hmm. We kind of worked in reverse, that every single marketing tool that you had mm-hmm. pushed people in to the website. And I can remember phrases like, the web is the hub of your communication strategy, yada, yada, yada. And the mm-hmm. website was that central point. And that was before we ever even got into the sophistication of, calls to action, conversion rate optimization, all of the kind of stuff that we do now and take for granted.
Yeah,
it was all pushing to the website. I think Sam makes a really good point that now, aside from perhaps, I would say possibly Google's the one stage before the website. Mm-hmm. When you get to the website, you are then shooting off into little microcosms of a brand, because they're kind of getting so fractured. So you'll go, okay, I'll go and see what the Instagram personality is, or I'll go and see what the LinkedIn side of the business is, or what the Twitter feed is saying. Or
and do you think that's an issue? Do you think that's an issue? Because you hear from some clients, don't you? They want to, they're desperate to keep them on page or in the environment, to the extent of once you've got somebody, a prospect or a customer into your world, being the website primarily. The moment you speak about throwing traffic away from there to diverting traffic somewhere else, everybody seems to get a bit panicky. Is that I think something people should be concerned about, or not? Do we think?
I think it's two viewpoints. I think Ollie will probably take a slightly different one to me.
Yeah.
In that he'll like come at it from a very much a kind of keep them in the system, capture data, keep them moving through. And then the other side of it is, well, isn't it better to keep them interested and engaged?
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. On the site is the ideal. I think you'd agree, Ollie, that's if you can do it all in one environment.
Mm-hmm.
But equally, is it credible? Is it possible? Is it functionally feasible to do everything you want to do in that one environment? You may want to, I don't know, I'll pick stuff out of thin air. You may have captured someone on your website, but you might want to demo a piece of SaaS software or show something that your platform can't support. So you do have to take them out. But I think as long as they're part of the journey, you can loop them back through. I think there's not a problem per se.
And I think you can't get in the way of what a user wants to do. And if a user wants to explore your social media, for example, at that point in time, for whatever reason that might be, then you don't want to get in the way of them. But it's also something you don't necessarily have to push people to do.
It does. That's really interesting in terms of, you're right, they need to be in control of their own destiny. But that makes it all the more crucial for the brand experience to be consistent across those channels, or have a connection or cohesiveness, so that when I go from www. to Instagram, I'm not suddenly hoyed out of one brand experience and put in a totally different world. There's got to be connectivity between the two.
Okay.
And some sort of like strategy that says, okay, this person has come from A to B. Now I'm going to let them, feel like they're walking their own path. But at every point, I'm trying to bring them back into a very specific kind of, I'm going to say the word click funnel or experience that has an outcome that I want to get to.
Well, let's pick up on that point then, because I was going to lead us into more around the objectives behind websites and what you're trying to achieve from it. But I guess we'll actually loop back to that later. One of the things clearly we want to discuss here is a lot of websites are very, very focused on inside out, who we are and what we do and what are our products and services. And we are seeing this shift in the towards customer centricity, non-linear selling, and that kind of non-linear experience where you are trying to, I think, as you said, John, almost predict what somebody wants when they come to your website, which is pretty difficult to do. Let's be honest. I think unless you know your buyers inside out and you're completely up to date with the relevant trends and even across markets and across sectors and across business groups and across, you name it, very, 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 very challenging to kind of nail that first time, which obviously allows for optimization as things go. But we are seeing a trend in the marketplace of people moving towards this, whether it's a chatbot flow through conversational marketing to kind of start that process, or ClickFunnels, as you've referred to there, John. Ollie, do you want to give an overview for maybe if anybody's listening who might not be that familiar with ClickFunnels as a point? Because I don't think it's something we've particularly referenced before on the podcast.
Yeah, so really it's all about channeling people through to a certain place, giving them a limited set of options and basically making it small steps at a time to be, here's that piece of information you want. You've got one option really from there, let's take you through to the next step and so on. So we're guiding people down a fairly narrow funnel, but one that's been designed, I suppose, from the beginning to be what the majority of the audience are likely to want and therefore more likely to engage them. Whereas obviously, if you think about a traditional website, it's more like, here's everything we have to offer, our full portfolio, full company info and so on.
Yeah, so the classic website would typically have why us, about us, services, case studies, contact pages and all that kind of thing. Whereas on the new way of approaching websites and kind of utilizing that ClickFunnel technology, you're almost going to be greeted with, what are you looking for today? And then some options to pick from, in a sense, aren't you? So it's still a website design. It's just a structure that's more conversational. And have you seen these, Sam? Are you familiar with these kind of websites where you've got these kind of options presented to you?
Yeah, I think they're quite interesting because it's sort of a similar journey built in a different way almost.
Yeah.
And I think people are trying to almost just optimize that journey and sort of empower their buyers to make decisions, and they're trying to make it easier. And It's streamlining the process, I guess.
A lot of people argue, I think, that they're doing this to cater for the modern B2B buyer, because this is what the modern B2B buyer wants. They want this freedom. They want this non-linear sales process. They don't want to be told. They want to educate themselves as part of that buying process. Do we think that is the case at the minute? I appreciate we might be early on in this, but do we think that that is representative of the average B2B buyer, particularly at the minute?
I think it can feel a bit false almost sometimes, where I think when people almost funnel too much and they say, this is what you want, this is what we're going to put in front of you.
Yeah.
It feels like instead of you allowing them to make the decisions, you're making decisions for them and then disguising it in a way that it appears that you have a bit more sort of free will than you do. So I think you have to be really careful on, I guess, how much funneling we do.
Because it can end up with quite an aggressive bombardment of questions, can't it, if you're not careful?
Yeah.
I think there's like this kind of interesting thing to remember, that behind it all, these people have already done a ton of research before they land on your site.
Yeah.
They'll, Ollie always quotes, people have read 4, 5, 6 pieces of content to every one of yours. You tend to find now, I think, people are more like ready when they land in that sales sort of process.
I think we might have lost Ollie, by the way. I don't know if he's there or not, but yeah, no, I think, sorry, John, I was just getting distracted then trying to mute him so we didn't lose the sound altogether. But yeah, no, I think I think you can end up creating that false kind of journey if you're not careful with the way it's done. But I also think at the minute it's very challenging not to do it in that way. But it's for me it's a lack of engagement. You're talking about engagement, and it doesn't feel.
It feels more going back to I don't want to say the bad old days, but when you had that kind of feeling of very hard cold call sales, where it was like, okay, we know this about you. Do you want to buy a widget off me?
Well, what happens if somebody comes to the website and one of the options you've given isn't what they're looking for? Different way of looking at it. So when you say you're here to do this, or this, what if they're not? Because it involves a very carefully orchestrated flow to make sure you get everything right. I know you can have a catch-all, something else as you're going through. But
I think it's a risk unless you know your market incredibly well. You are, and I think this is potentially why it works, or you see more of it in the kind of the B2C arena, is that you don't tend to get multiple personas to the degree that you do in B2B with a B2C offer. So I don't know, let's pick a chocolate biscuit, for example. There's not like a massive buying cycle and multiple personas involved in that. There's some very simple things. Do you like chocolate? Yes. Do you like biscuits? Do you want our chocolate biscuits? Type of thing. It's kind of whereas with the type of thing the world we work in, and in B2B in general, you tend to find not only have you got incredibly complex kind of buying cycles, you've got multiple personas, potentially multiple uses, multiple markets.
Yeah.
So to actually do that really true, pure, straight down, 1, 2, 3, and you're there, it's nigh on impossible. Yeah. So you've got to do so much pre-qualifying.
Well, what I'd say here is this is where we should really start thinking about research and optimization seriously, because a large number of clients and companies out there kind of still treat websites like, let's build it once and that'll be great forever. Whereas if you carry out that research properly beforehand to understand, not just assume, but really understand what your buyers are out there looking for. And then as you start to introduce this kind of process, make sure you understand, are the options that are being presented actually reflecting them or not? And if not, add to that. Then you can end up developing a journey that's smoother and faster. But if you don't do that research, and if you just make the assumptions, I think there's a big danger that you'll just end up, you might be, giving a great experience to a set of the audience, but there's probably another set of the audience that are just getting really frustrated because the options that are being presented to them aren't what they're looking for.
And do you reckon, is that where things like getting a bit more focused on SEO, potentially using subdomains, and kind of almost like creating more granular individual journeys, would that help there?
Potentially. Getting into the technical setup, I don't think there's necessarily a reason to start splitting things out. It's more about understanding where the users are coming from, what channel they're coming from, and trying to tie that into the journey, because you'll have more of an understanding then about what they're up to. So for example, if they have come through SEO, if they've come through paid search, we should know roughly what they're coming in looking at. So let's give them an experience.
So kind of
this
to the journey based on that kind of referral point.
Yeah, exactly.
I get the principles of it very much so. I can understand that it's going to increase the speed of finding what you want or could do. I understand delivering a more personalized experience, so it's not, you don't have to wade through the generic content that's sat there. But I don't know, for me, for the meantime, the examples I've seen of it, and I guess certainly not kicking Social Chain here, because they've led the way in this, and they've effectively, for the meantime, abolished their traditional website altogether in favor of this more, I call it ClickFunnels experience. And I think you're right, John. Exactly right. And when you say in terms of it's more the B2B, B2C split here, arguably, but it just falls a bit flat with me. It certainly doesn't feel like a futuristic use of technology. But I wonder whether we're being naive to an extent as the consumer, arguably here, when you go on the website of, are they really just building a database of data and for future AI use here, where they can make more predictions around people's behavior and what people want when they come to the website, and therefore apply that to their clients' websites? Because obviously they're trying to build a tool here, I assume, build it out so it's something they can sell further down the line.
I can see what they're trying to achieve, and I think depending on what you're looking for, I think at the minute that might be delivering the right kind of experience to customers. Yeah. So I think there's an argument here for, if you think about the size of a website, it's often quite hard to find what you're looking for. If you can just give people the 5 bullet points they need to know, instead of having to have them hunt around your website for 20 minutes, that can be a much better user experience. And I think that's what they're trying to achieve, get you to that key information quickly. I suppose they're supporting kind of like guided selling, really, instead of taking you through the whole rigmarole. Let's just get you what you want. So I think from that point of view, it makes sense. And I think, coming back to your other point there, there's definitely an argument here that they can use this to build on a lot of understanding in terms of how they should be shaping things for themselves in the future, but also how they should be shaping things for clients. Because with anything like this, and this ties into things like conversational marketing too, the more people you have interacting with something, the more data you have in terms of, is it working for them? What would they rather see at this point? What do people typically do when they do this? Whereas I think it's probably a bit harder with a website in general, because it's so open. It's probably easier to see when our guided path isn't working for somebody than it is to see when a big open field isn't, guiding someone correctly.
It just feels incredibly rudimentary though, doesn't it? I think also because I know it isn't, and I know, we've done it with the conversational marketing side, and how challenging it is to implement and get the flows correct and optimized and so on. But I guess, Sam, from a design perspective, it hardly pops, does it, at the minute? It doesn't feel like a premium kind of offering, maybe?
I think it's a difficult balance, and I started thinking about it before with, I think we're quite good nowadays at sort of throwing around the sort of term of, this is the new thing, or, this is dead, we're doing it this way. And I think looking at a website like this, I think they've maybe lent into the chatbot functionality too much and sacrificed, instead of creating this as something that can effectively replace a website. I think they've sacrificed some of the functionality of a website when maybe they shouldn't have. So I think it's important to find, from a design and UX standpoint, an effective balance of, this chatbot will lead you through and help you navigate a website that otherwise might be confusing, but also having that shop window. There's nothing bad about having the shop window. It's quite a positive thing to be able to show people an insight into your business and then guide them through that process. And I think you sort of combine the sales funnel with the letting them have an experience. It doesn't have to be right, where do you want to be? You want to be at the about section in 2 seconds flat, click this button. Sometimes I think people want to experience that website and that brand.
I think one of the things here, and I think it could go either way really, which is that they're defying convention. There's no doubt about that. So that can obviously have a bit of a positive impact initially. There'll be a bit of kind of buzz around it, and people will share it because it's different. But also from a usability point of view, when something isn't conventional, it generally starts to confuse people.
just from the point of view of, where do I go now if I want to see an example of this on the website, or where do I go to see that on the website? Because it's not where I'm used to websites putting things. It can be harder for me to find. So, for example, we're all familiar with a main nav bar that is often these days sticky at the top of the site, or we're familiar with that burger menu, the 3 lines that will bring a full menu. If a site doesn't have that and there's no obvious menu, it means that there's a little bit of time for me as a user to find where the information that I'm looking for is. So obviously they're trying to address that, but I think that's just, it can go either way. Is it enhancing and new enough that I'm loving it, or is it confusing and frustrating? And I think time will tell with their audience how people find it.
Yeah, I appreciate their bravery for trying something new, and I also think they are trying to they're almost trying to shape the future with what they're doing. I think, and force the future through, which I understand. And I'm always trying to balance with personally myself that it feels unfamiliar, as you said there, Ollie, in the sense that there is a certain comfort in familiarity of a design of a website, that you do know where to find things, the basic structure, the walkthrough, and I personally think in B2B with a lot of the clients that I personally work with, that's valued still. Just the ability to know the flow, to know the rough structure of the website and know where to find things. And I think, as Sam was saying, getting the balance right, maybe between conversational marketing, chatbot interactions, ClickFunnels, alongside a more traditional website experience, or maybe a hybrid of some kind to trial it. Social Chain have clearly gone, balls out to do the full more ClickFunnels experience.
Because that's what we have seen with some clients and with other companies out there, is that you'd have your traditional website experience, and you'd have something like a chatbot that would give you that more to the point, quick guided view of information.
I think it's what you want out of it as well, isn't it? I think that's always kind of got to drive what the technology you employ. So I always find, for me personally, I find chatbots, conversational marketing, ClickFunnels they're always orbiting around a very specific outcome.
Yeah. Be
that a demo, a sale, a call, an actual tangible thing. That, I think, I've kind of come to accept that that's okay.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing when you're in research phase, the last thing that you want is to be forced in any one direction. And I think, particularly in B2B, people, if you don't give people a choice, they'll immediately, it's like anything, if it's Hobson's choice and there's no choice, people will veer away from it. So I think Sam nailed it on the head there, that the platform, the technology, the way that you interact should correlate to the timeline. So thinking about if someone's aware, you don't want to put someone who's unaware into a ClickFunnels straight away. It's like, I don't know, I always liken this whole buying cycle to going on a date or trying to meet someone. You don't just, you've got to be pretty brave and pretty confident to walk across a room and just start talking at someone about what you can give them. Typically what you'll do is you'll do some research, you'll kind of engage slowly and surely and give valuable insight and content along the way to a point. And I just think ClickFunnels are sort of right at the end of that chain, and they have a place. They absolutely have a place to kind of help people just get over the final. I think they do have a place. I still question, unless you've got an incredibly simplistic B2B business, whether they've got a place at the minute. I'm not convinced. I suppose it's not often I say that. Normally I do embrace any technology and stuff, but I think for me, for the meantime, I wonder if it's a bit too soon in B2B, because it's so unfamiliar to go for the whole hog with it. And that's where I do think the conversational marketing bots come into play, where you can dip your toe in that area and see and optimize and track and see what kind of engagement you get with it. ClickFunnels Lite, isn't it? I mean, it's the perfect way to do it, in that you should, I guess, if you've got all your technology kind of aligned and the stack working properly, you should know and be able to lead score almost dynamically that person, their kind of what they've done, where they've been, what they've downloaded, how long they've been there. And there'll be a point where you hit the trigger, isn't there, Ollie, of whatever we decide, 66 or whatever the lead score is, that you can go, right, well, let's engage the conversational marketing now, because they've done this, this, and this. We know this, we can apply this, and we can offer them this.
I think,
and then it works.
especially if we look at B2B at the minute, and going back to, I think it's Matt's point about, I guess, the level of complexity. It's a really long decision-making process for a lot of our clients' buyers, and they need to do a lot of research. They need to do a lot of understanding. There's a lot of documentation that they're likely to want to see with relation to products before they make a decision. And that's obviously going to start, there'll be a lot of thought leadership content and educational content, but then you'll get into that really detailed, granular content a lot of the time around like specs and case studies and things like that. And a guided journey isn't necessarily, in my opinion, like the best place for that. If you look at what Social Chain is putting out there at the moment on their website, just as an example, they're giving you that short introduction to each subject, and then it's have a conversation to find out more. And if you look at the way B2B buyers are typically buying these days, they're doing a lot more of that research process before reaching out to someone. So if you've not got a lot of content out there on your website, but your competitors have a wealth of content that would allow your buyers to kind of self-qualify, but they can't qualify whether yours or not is the right solution, then they might end up just going with the people whose solutions they can verify without having to reach out.
And there's kind of a comfort factor of having that, isn't there? I'm a great believer that if you can't back up what it is you're purporting to sell, it's very hard to convince someone to actually engage with you and think about building a relationship. Yeah, and that's where you're right. The case studies have got to have depth. They've got to have results. They've got to have kind of context.
And I guess looping back across all this to close out today, because obviously we've talked a lot around ClickFunnels, which I think is interesting because it's a relatively new-ish thing. It's been around for a couple of years, but we're starting to see it come to the forefront slightly more across the various B2C applications and creeping into B2B. But ultimately, I think when we're working with clients across web projects and so on, the key thing is fundamentally not losing sight of the objective of what you want that website to do. In its simplest form, correct? So in the sense of, is it a lead generation website? Is it for awareness? Is it more of that shop window kind of classic introduction and brand awareness piece? But the one thing I would say is if it's a lead generation website, I also recommend having something in there that's obviously going to help generate those leads, because I think we've seen several clients of late, not particularly on projects we've been engaged to work on with them, where they'll refer to it as it's a lead gen website. And you go, great, okay, cool. How are you driving traffic to it? And what content have you got? And what have you got to the engagements on there? And what's the call to actions? And when you go on the websites, there's none of that in a way. So there's no valuable engaging content. There's nothing to keep people interested or occupied. And also the call to actions are either hidden or non-existent. So
I think it's quite common to see call to actions along the lines of, get in touch. And you'll see them often. And a website might have that written on every page. But how often are people really engaging with them? And where is that person that's on your site in the buying cycle? Have they just found out about your products and solutions? And
it seems
it's still really early on and they're not ready to talk to sales yet. They might just want some additional information. Or are they somebody that's come through a paid search ad that's really specific and they know they want to buy at the time, in which case that contact box might be the perfect thing for them at that moment.
I think building on that, we have a sort of, I think we almost have an issue of, there's a bit of like a generalization, I think, when I think people say this is what the B2B buyer wants, and we sort of pigeonhole it into one person and say that, they want to get from A to B as quick as possible. And I think listening to you guys talk about sort of the user experience angle of it, I think we have to consider that there's certain people that want certain different things. A lot of people want to do that extra research before they get in touch. A lot of people know they want to come to the website and get straight in touch. I think the danger with a chatbot is that sometimes you can push people along the same journey. When there's a a multitude of buyer needs that you need to fill.
I think that's where if you get the automated chatbot flows and the conversational marketing flows designed but tailored to every part of that journey, which I know is what Ollie and the team do at BDB to that extent, because the generic chatbot pop-up that doesn't say anything, that's unprompted, I'm not into that either, because I think, like, as John would say, that's just bombarding people with the relevant pestering. Whereas if you've got it tailored to, somebody's looking at a case study, let's say, on your site, and the chatbot pops up and says, this case study focused on PR. Would you also like to see another case study on PR? Or would you like to learn more about our other services? And then instantly it feels a more tailored approach, which is beyond a ClickFunnels, which I agree with you, Sam. A ClickFunnels just going, this is a one, like,
that's a mindset thing.
Go down this
path. This is your journey.
Yeah,
I think with
that's a
anything else,
mindset thing that people need, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of they need to think clearly. Technology will not by or in essence of itself solve your problems. It is there to help.
yeah.
And if you don't, as a business or a brand or a product or an individual or a corporate entity, have a position on what you want to achieve, just banging in a click funnel, and we've all been in conversations with clients and with colleagues and with people where they're going, well, we'll just do that. And you think, well, just let's put the anchors on and figure out why we want to do it. And there are places for all of these things, whether we like them, dislike them, feel they've got value. There's a place for everything, but you need to figure it out in your customer's journey. And it might be that, persona A never sees a click funnel, never sees a chat bot, just browses. Persona B might be just conversational marketing the whole way. And that's kind of, I guess, where the interesting stuff comes, is working the dynamics of who engages with what type of technology and how.
Any other closing remarks before I wrap up?
I suppose just echoing what you said a moment ago, Matt, for one thing, it's focusing on what you want things like your website to achieve, and then tying this all together. And I'm sure we reiterate this point a lot, but just take that time to understand your buyer and make sure you're building a great customer experience for them, because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters.
Yeah, and I think on that point, the key thing is don't assume. I think I always come back to this point, but when we say understanding your buyer, I think everybody falls foul of thinking they understand the B2B buyer. And you can read as many journals and you can read as many Harvard Business Review pieces on understanding the modern B2B buyer. And that's theory. And obviously there's stats and there's research behind it. But understanding your B2B buyer, the person that engages with your products and services, is absolutely critical in this process, and may involve a level of deep dive research before you even start thinking about design and UX and so on. So
just a tiny thing to add to that is that you'll have some knowledge of that from speaking to your sales teams and account handlers, but they'll only have one perspective of it. So reaching out and speaking to the buyers themselves and to prospects is the way to complete that. And you'll find that there's usually an awful lot of overlap in terms of opinion there, but there'll be also some places where that diverges. And if you just rely on your internal opinions, then you're missing out something really important.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks very much, guys. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, John. Thanks, Ollie. Feel free to check out our latest knowledge release, which is all around brand. And I think it's brand during a crisis. Is that right, John?
It is indeed, yeah. Quite pertinent, I think.
Yeah. So check that out on www.b2bknowledge.com, our online ungated content hub to help our clients, prospects and contacts navigate the ever-evolving B2B marketing landscape. And on that note, thanks very much, and we will see you next week. Thank you. Bye.